Please note, Night Terrors is for a mature audience only. Episodes may contain language, violent images, and extreme gore.
Greetings, traveler. Welcome back. You've arrived just in time for tonight's tale. A story of ambition, desperation, and the dangers of meddling with forces beyond your understanding. This one takes us to a place a long time ago in a galaxy far, far away. But beware, not all treasures bring fortune, and some doors, once opened, can never be closed. Now, shall we uncover the truth together? Let us begin.
It has been 18 years since the Emperor's infamous Order 66 plunged the galaxy into darkness. The Jedi Order has been destroyed, their temples desecrated, and their artifacts scattered across the stars. Under the Empire's iron grip, a shadow economy thrives. Smugglers, scavengers, and relic hunters gamble their lives for the priceless treasures of the ancient Jedi, risking not only Imperial wrath, but also the dangers lurking in the ruins of the past. On the moon of Vareth IV, whispers of a hidden Jedi temple have reached the ears of Terran and his son Zarek, desperate scavengers hunted by ruthless creditors. Hoping to find riches beyond imagining, they venture into the unknown, unaware of the powerful force that awaits them. Zarek's life had always been a balancing act, teetering between survival and despair. He was no stranger to long nights spent hunched over the nav controls of their battered freighter, listening to his father, Terran, curse at their dwindling fuel reserves or the latest bounty hunter with a vengeful creditor. But something about this trip felt different. The moon of Vareth IV loomed ahead, its jagged surface bathed in the eerie green glow of its nearby gas giant. The ship's sensors had already picked up the faint outlines of an ancient structure, a long-forgotten temple hidden among the crags. Terran grunted as he set the freighter down with a jolt, muttering something about another damned fool's errand. Terran had spent much of his life chasing impossible dreams. Zarek knew why. Though his father rarely spoke of it, his mother, Alira, had been a Jedi Knight, sworn to the Order's rigid code. Against all odds, she'd fallen in love with Terran, a smuggler who had swept her into a world of freedom she could only dream of. Their secret marriage was a defiance of everything the Jedi stood for, but it had also been their greatest joy, until Order 66. The Empire's purge had taken Alira from them when Zarek was just a baby, leaving Terran with a grief so deep it had etched itself into his very being. He never blamed her for her loyalty to the Jedi, but neither could he forgive the Order for taking her from him. He had raised Zarek alone, teaching him to survive in a galaxy that had no love for the weak. But sometimes, late at night, when he thought Zarek couldn't hear, he would whisper her name as if clinging to a memory that grew fainter with each passing year. Zarek, however, was no ordinary boy. Terran had seen the signs, the uncanny way Zarek could sense things before they happened, or how he seemed to understand people's intentions with little more than a glance. Terran had never called it what it was, but he knew, and he prayed fiercely and silently that the Force would never come for his son the way it had come for Alira.
"Let's make this quick,"
Ren growled, hefting the blaster rifle over his shoulder. The wiry, nervous relic hunter always seemed to have one eye on Terran and the other on the horizon, as though expecting trouble to pounce from either direction.
We need something big this time. Huge. That bounty hunter we dodged in the last system, he's not gonna give up. We need to pay the debt and disappear for a while, or we're done.
Terran shot him a glare. Keep that defeatist nonsense to yourself. A temple this far out? Bet you anything those imps haven't found it yet.
Doesn't mean there aren't other scavengers,
Ren muttered.
Or traps, or worse. You've heard the stories about Jedi temples, right? Cursed treasures, defenses, maybe even ghosts.
Terran's jaw tightened. The Jedi weren't sorcerers or spooks, Ren. They were warriors, protectors. Maybe the Order made mistakes, but they didn't deserve what the Empire did to them. His voice softened, just a fraction. Not all of them. Zarek barely heard them. As the group moved closer to the temple, the oppressive weight of the moon's silence seemed to press down on him. The air itself felt charged as though crackling with energy, and the faintest whisper teased in his mind. Zarek. He stopped in his tracks, his breath catching. Zarek. The voice was smooth and compelling, like warm honey dripping into his mind. You can hear me, can't you? You feel it, don't you? The power within you. You've always felt it. The Force flows through you, Zarek, the way it flowed through your mother. You could be a very powerful Jedi. What is it, Zarek? Terran's gruff voice snapped him out of the trance. He shook his head, forcing a grin to hide his unease. Nothing, he said. Let's keep moving. But the voice lingered, soft yet insistent, whispering truths Zarek wasn't ready to confront. The others don't understand. They can't. But I can help you unlock your true potential. Step into the temple, Zarek. Your destiny awaits. The temple loomed ahead like the mouth of some great beast, its entrance carved into the jagged rock. Zarek couldn't help but glance at his father and Ren. If they felt the same unease, they weren't showing it. But as they stepped into the shadows of the ancient structure, Zarek couldn't ignore the whisper in his mind, growing louder with each step. The temple's inner sanctum stood before them, a heavy stone door etched with symbols that seemed to shift and shimmer in the dim light of their glow rods. Ancient Jedi runes were carved into the stones framing the door, spiraling patterns that whispered of secrets and power.
Figures,
Ren muttered, tapping the door with the butt of his blaster.
No way this thing's gonna open. Probably locked for centuries.
Terran studied the symbols with a frown. These markings, they're Jedi, right? Some kind of language?
Could be,
Ren said.
Or just decoration. Either way, we're not blasting through that. Any ideas?
Zarek stepped closer, his heart racing. The runes seemed to pulse faintly, their patterns calling to him. The sensation was impossible to ignore, like the Force itself was reaching out, guiding his eyes across the symbols. One by one, they began to glow softly, forming a sequence only he could see. I think... Zarek hesitated, his hand hovering over the first glowing rune. I think I know how to open it.
What?
Ren shot him a skeptical look.
How could you possibly?
Let him try, Terran said, his voice firm but calm. What's the worst that happens? Zarek swallowed hard and pressed the first glowing rune. A low hum filled the air, and the symbol faded. He moved to the next, and the next, his hand guided as if by instinct. With each press, the glow intensified until the entire door seemed to radiate light. Then, with a deep rumble, the door slid open, revealing a dark corridor stretching into the temple's heart.
Well, I'll be,
Ren muttered, wide-eyed.
Kid's got a knack.
Terran's gaze lingered on Zarek, a mix of pride and unease in his eyes. Good work, son. Let's move. They stepped inside, their glow rods casting faint light on walls lined with carved reliefs of Jedi battles and meditations. The air was thick, almost suffocating, and the faint sound of shifting stone echoed in the distance. "Stay sharp," Terran said, gripping his blaster tightly. They hadn't gone far when they encountered the first trap. A set of narrow stone beams stretched across the corridor, each one covered in fine, dusted carvings. Ren crouched down, inspecting the setup.
"Looks like a tripwire," he said. "We cut this rope and—"
"No!" Zarek's voice cut through the silence, sharp and certain. Ren froze, turning to glare at him.
"What now, kid?"
Zarek pointed to the wall, where vines clung to the stone. "That's a decoy. Look there." He stepped forward, brushing the vines aside to reveal a nearly invisible cord leading to a series of hidden grooves in the wall. "This is the real trigger. If you cut the wrong one, we're all dead." Ren muttered something under his breath, but stepped back, letting Zarek carefully untangle the correct rope. With a deliberate motion, Zarek severed it, and the faint grinding of stone faded into silence.
"Well,"
Ren said after a moment,
"that's 2 for you, kid."
Terran gave Zarek an approving nod. "Keep it up." As they continued deeper into the temple, Zarek couldn't shake the feeling that the traps weren't just mechanical. They were alive, part of the Force itself, testing him, and something or someone was watching. The temple tested them at every turn. Zarek's instincts and guidance saved their lives more times than they could count. Shifting walls nearly crushed them, and bridges over endless chasms threatened to crumble underfoot. Energy traps disguised as harmless carvings fired beams of destruction, and puzzles with false solutions promised instant death to the unwary. If not for Zarek, they would never have made it. His uncanny sense for the temple's dangers allowed them to bypass lethal traps and uncover the correct paths forward. By the time they reached the central chamber, their nerves were frayed, but they were alive. The heavy doors slid open, revealing a room bathed in a soft golden glow. At its center stood a grand sarcophagus, its surface carved with elegant reliefs depicting a Jedi in heroic poses, battles fought, wisdom shared, peace brought to a fractured galaxy. At the foot of the sarcophagus rested an ancient tome propped up on a raised dais. The room was littered with relics of the Jedi Order, shards of kyber crystals shimmering in vibrant hues, ornate golden artifacts, and polished weapons of a bygone era.
"Now that's what I'm talking about,"
Ren said, his eyes lighting up as he moved toward the nearest pile of treasures, his fingers itching to grab the nearest golden trinket. Terran, however, was drawn to the tome. Reverently, he picked it up, the ancient leather binding cool beneath his fingers. He stepped back from the others, opening the book slowly, as if handling something sacred. Ren and Zarek paid him no mind. Ren was engrossed in the treasures, running his hands over shimmering relics, while Zarek's gaze was locked on the lightsaber resting atop the sarcophagus. The voice that had guided him through the temple now returned, smooth and reassuring. "You've done well, Zarek. You've proven yourself worthy. Your destiny lies here. Take it, and you will become what your mother was. You will protect your father. You will rebuild the Jedi Order." The lightsaber seemed to call to him, gleaming with quiet promises. His feet moved almost unconsciously, carrying him closer to the sarcophagus. Meanwhile, Terran read on, his brow furrowing as the story of the Jedi unfolded. The Jedi, he murmured to himself, was a hero, a warrior without equal. His mastery of the Force brought peace to entire systems. They revered him as a savior. But the tone shifted as he turned the pages. The text grew darker, more foreboding. Until he fell. Terran muttered under his breath. His eyes narrowed and he gripped the tome tighter. Consumed by his ambition, he became Darth Korath, The story painted a grim picture of Korath's descent into the dark side, his rise as a Sith Lord, his tyranny and the devastation he wrought. Terran's breath hitched as he reached the final passage. The Jedi had defeated Korath, but not without great loss. The Sith Lord's body was entombed here, sealed within the sarcophagus. But before his death, Korath had achieved the unthinkable. He had transferred his essence into his lightsaber, binding his soul to the weapon. Terran's heart pounded as he read the warning etched into the ancient pages. Only the strongest of Jedi Masters can resist the essence of Darth Korath. Any who dares to touch this weapon shall be consumed. Their body will become his vessel. His power will live again. Terran's eyes darted to the sarcophagus and to Zarek, who was reaching for the lightsaber. "Zarek, no!" Terran's voice rang out, panicked and hoarse. But it was too late. Zarek's fingers closed around the lightsaber's hilt, and the world seemed to hold its breath. The weapon was cold, unnaturally so, sending a shiver up his arm, as if something alive were slithering beneath his skin. With a sharp snap hiss, the crimson blade ignited, casting a blood-red glow across the chamber. The hum of the saber filled the air, low and menacing, like the growl of a predator. Suddenly, Zarek staggered. His breath came in shallow gasps as the Sith's presence flooded his mind. A torrent of rage, hunger, and malice. "Yes!" A deep voice rumbled in his head, triumphant and cruel. "You are mine now!" Zarek screamed, his body convulsing as Darth Korath's essence took hold. His vision blurred, reality twisting into a nightmare. Terran and Ren transformed before his eyes, their faces grotesque and monstrous, their movements slow and distorted like shadows in a dream. They weren't his father or friend anymore. They were enemies. Ren took a cautious step forward, his hand instinctively dropping to his blaster. "Zarek?" he said, his voice unsteady. "What are you doing?" Zarek didn't respond, the Sith's voice urging him forward. "They will betray you. They mean to destroy you. Strike them down." Ren froze as Zarek turned towards him, the crimson blade humming at his side. The fear in Ren's eyes was unmistakable, his chest rising and falling with quick, shallow breaths. "No, kid, no!" Zarek moved with inhuman precision, the saber rising in a blur of red light. Ren flinched, raising his arm in defense, but the strike came too fast. The blade sliced through Ren's forearm with brutal ease, the cauterizing heat instantly sealing the wound. Ren's scream tore through the chamber, raw and guttural, as he stumbled back and fell to his knees. His severed limb hit the ground with a sickening thud, the charred stump still smoking. Zarek loomed over him, the blade crackling ominously. Ren's wide eyes reflected the saber's glow, his terror palpable as Zarek raised the weapon again. Time seemed to slow, the blade poised for a final strike. "Zarek!" Terran's voice cut through the tension, sharp and desperate. Zarek turned, his glowing eyes locking onto his father. To him, Terran was no longer the man who raised him, but a towering figure cloaked in shadows, his features twisted and monstrous. "You!" Zarek growled, his voice low and guttural, dripping with malice. "You won't stop me!" Terran took a step back, his hands raised in a gesture of placation. "Zarek, listen to me. It's your father. This isn't you. You have to fight it." But Zarek didn't hear him. The Sith's voice drowned out everything else. "Destroy him. He is a threat. He will betray you just as the others did." The lightsaber hummed as Zarek advanced, his movements fluid and deliberate. Terran's heart pounded as he saw the deadly intent in his son's glowing eyes as he raised the saber to strike. Then Zarek heard another voice. "Zarek, my son." The voice was soft, gentle, cutting through the storm in his mind like a ray of light breaking through dark clouds. Zarek froze, the lightsaber trembling in his grip. "Who?" he whispered. "It's me," the voice said, calm and steady. "Your mother. This isn't you. You are stronger than this. You are my son. Let go of the darkness. Come back to the light. Come back to us."
No!
The Sith's voice roared, his presence tightening around Zarek's mind like a vice.
You are mine! You will obey!
Zarek gritted his teeth, his entire body trembling as he fought against the overwhelming darkness.
Get out!
He screamed, his voice raw with effort. With a final surge of willpower, Zarek pushed the Sith's essence from his mind. The dark energy tore free, spiraling out of him in a cloud of shadow and rage before retreating into the lightsaber. The blade extinguished with a sharp hiss, and Zarek collapsed to his knees, gasping for air. Terran rushed to his son's side, kneeling beside him. "Zarek," he said, gripping his shoulders. Are you all right?" Zarek looked up at him, his face pale and streaked with sweat. I heard her," he whispered. "Mom, she spoke to me. She saved me." Terran's breath caught, his eyes glistening. He pulled Zarek into a tight embrace. "She's always with us, son. Always." Behind them, Ren groaned from the floor.
Hey, nothing like a little father-son time, but could someone help out the guy with one arm here?
He muttered, his voice thick with pain but tinged with the usual sarcasm. Terran turned, his jaw tightening. He walked over and helped Ren to his feet. "We need to get out of here. Can you walk?" Ren winced but nodded.
"Yeah, I'll sure as hell walk out of here."
Terran returned to Zarek and helped him to his feet, keeping a firm grip on his son's shoulder. Zarek was trembling but steady enough to walk. Together they turned towards the chamber's entrance, the oppressive weight of the place still pressing down on them. "Come on," Terran said firmly, his voice cutting through the haze of silence. "We're leaving this place, now." Zarek nodded weakly, glancing back at the sarcophagus. The lightsaber lay inert on the floor beside it, but even the sight of it made his stomach churn. He forced himself to look away. Ren staggered behind them, his injured arm cradled against his chest.
"You know,"
he said through gritted teeth, his tone sardonic,
"starting to think tomb raiding just ain't my thing."
And a minute later, he left the chamber. The trio retraced their steps through the labyrinthine temple, Zarek's instincts guiding them past the still active traps. Each step out of the ancient structure felt like a small victory, the air growing lighter as the cursed place faded behind them and they returned to their ship. The battered freighter shuddered as its engines roared to life, the landing gear retracting as they lifted off the moon's surface. The oppressive silence of the temple was replaced by the familiar hum of the ship's systems. Terran sat at the controls, his hand steady despite the tension etched into his face. "We'll figure something out," he said, breaking the silence. "Another way to cover the debt. I'm not risking your life again, Zarek." Zarek sat slumped in the co-pilot's seat, his head resting against the bulkhead. "I'm sorry, Dad," he said softly. I thought I could handle it." Terran turned to him, his expression softening. "You did. You fought it, son. That's what matters. And you heard your mother. She's proud of you. So am I." A faint smile crossed Zarek's face, though his exhaustion was palpable. Across the cabin, Ren sat in a worn chair, his injured arm secured in a medical sling. His usual smirk had returned despite the pain.
"Don't worry about the debt," he said casually. "I grabbed a couple of shiny things on the way out. Might fetch enough to keep the bounty hunters off our backs."
Terran shook his head, his voice stern. "You better not have grabbed anything cursed." Ren chuckled faintly.
"Define cursed."
Terran sighed, turning his focus back to the ship's navigation. Wren leaned back in his chair, his good hand slipping into the pouch at his feet. His fingers brushed against the smooth, cold hilt of the lightsaber, and he let out a low breath. Slowly, his fingers traced along its surface, almost reverently. For a brief moment, his eyes flickered with a faint, unnatural yellow glow. A knowing smile crept across his face as he murmured,
"Like I said, don't worry about the dead or the bounty hunters. I've got that covered."
The glow subsided as he leaned back, his fingers still resting on the weapon.
Ah, Zarek may have fought back the darkness this time, guided by Mommy's love, but shadows have a way of lingering. As for Wren, oh dear Wren, greedy hands, or hand, often grasp what they shouldn't. But don't worry about him. He just found himself a powerful new friend. So remember, treasure hunter, not all riches bring fortune, and some doors should never be opened, for when the darkness calls, it might just follow you home. Sweet nightmares.
If you're enjoying the stories from the Ranger's Grove, please consider liking, sharing, and subscribing. Thank you.